Again, for those of you who came in a little bit after my first couple announcements, my name's Anna Johnson. I'm the marketing manager here at Concordia Technology Solutions. My name and my email and phone number are up there on your screen in just a second, hopefully. So you can give me a call or send me an email anytime if for some reason your questions don't get answered during this webinar. We're aiming to go through all the features of the software at some point in time. So hopefully it'll give you a little jump start, whether you're a current customer who's just trying out the software for the first time, or if you are a prospective customer. This is for you just to sit here and learn more. A little bit about Concordia Technology Solutions. We are the Church Administration Division of Concordia Publishing House. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Concordia Publishing House, we are the publishing arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Now, because this is a computer software program and maybe doesn't have the same theological implications as some of our other works, we do have church clients from all different denominations and churches who have found the software helpful. Just a little bit more about Concordia Publishing House. We've been around for quite a while. This is a picture of our booth at the 1904 World's Fair, and I always think that's kind of a fun fact, especially considering what we're talking about today. When they were there, they didn't have computers, they didn't have accounting software, but we've stuck around. We've tried to make changes with the times in order to provide you, our customers, and our churches with the best software possible to help you in your ministry, so you're not spending time on those menial tasks and you can really focus on the people and do the things you love in ministering to them. Here's a picture of what Concordia Publishing House looks like today. That's a picture of our Innovation Center on the 3rd floor. We've been developing software for churches since 1984. For those of you who may have been our customers for a while, perhaps even since then, you might be familiar with our other product, Shepherd Staff, which is a PC-based version of church management and finance software. The product Ledger that we'll be talking about today is the web-based version of church finance software. Just want to give you guys a quick outline for our time today. Overall, we'll have an hour and a half for our presentation, sorry. It'll be 60 minutes. That'll hopefully be me just talking. Sometimes I run a little under that depending on how fast I'm going. And then the last 30 minutes we've reserved for your questions. So if you have questions at any time throughout the presentation, even if it's something simple like you can't hear me or you can't see my screen, just let me know and we'll get those answered either in the moment if that's appropriate or definitely by the end of the presentation. As I was saying, you're allowed to ask questions anytime. Just keep in mind that I might not be able to get to it right in the middle. And as you saw in the emails today, the recording will be shared. We post recordings of all our overview webinars onto YouTube so that if someone at your church wasn't able to make it today, or even if you're able to, if you have to step out during part of the presentation, you'll be able to watch what we're doing and you'll be able to catch up on anything that you missed. A little bit more about Church360 Ledger. It's one product in really a suite of 3 products, which we call Church360, the 360 standing for complete church management. So in addition to this finance piece, we have Church360 Members, which is a membership database program for your software. You can record all your members' contact info, you can record pastoral visit information and actual offering contributions in there, and then that floats over to Ledger to manage your actual books for your church. And then the third component of that Church360 suite is Church360 Unite, which many of our churches use as a website building platform. So different information is shared through all these 3 programs, even though today we'll just focus on Ledger. And we have different mixes of that within our customer base. Some people just have Ledger, some people have Ledger and Members, some people have Ledger, Members, and Unite. So whatever your situation is or prospective situation, hopefully you'll find some value in the software that you'll be able to take away today. When we were designing this software, we had three goals in mind. We wanted it to be intuitive. We know that not everybody working or volunteering at a church is used to computer programs or is even used to working with church finances. We come across a lot of willing volunteers who might not know that much but just want to help. So we had that really in mind. We definitely wanted it to be secure, especially with Ledger as we're dealing with financial information and bank accounts. We don't want anybody in there who's not supposed to be in there. And we also wanted it to be focused. The way our developers set this up is that they were doing fund-based accounting, and so it manages all your contributions and things by fund and not by accrual or other kind of accounting methods. I'm going to pause for a minute. I see that one person is not able to see my screen right now. It should have three little icons on the bottom and say Church Finance Software. If any of you also cannot see that, could you let me know in the chat, and hopefully we'll get that resolved as quickly as possible. I'm just going to move on to my next slide quickly. It should have Church360 Ledger and then overview of Church360 Ledger. So that's our outline for today. I'm going to give you a complete tour of the software and then answer any questions or answers that you might have today. I'm not seeing any other comments in there about being able to see my screen or not. If you cannot see this, just let me know, or if you can hear me and not see it, let me know. We'll back up for a few minutes. Otherwise, Tommy, I'll send you the complete slide deck after the presentation, and hopefully you can get caught up. Just a little bit overview of what we were thinking about and talking about when we were developing this software. We know that talking about church finances is very difficult. It's a difficult subject, whether it's your pastor talking from the pulpit or whether it's you just talking about with your fellow congregation members. Nobody really likes to talk about money, but it's so important that you're able to talk about those things, that you're able to fund the mission of the church, so the new things that are happening. And we know that when people give to church, it's not out of reluctance, but it's really because they've wanted to do these things, that every dollar has been donated, that these donations come from the heart, and that they're given in love and in faithfulness to God's mission and His church. So as stewards, we want to make sure that we're using God's gifts to the best they can be. And one way to do that is to account for the different types of giving methods that are going on at your church. So we have some people giving individual donations. We have management of those larger books and everything else. We want to make sure that every dollar spent is accountable and is accounted for to somewhere with someone. We also know that many churches have an issue where they need to get audited every year, or they choose to get audited every year, and we want to make sure that our software is able to track those audit trails. So what does accountability look like? It prevents the ill intention from doing wrong. So those people, unfortunately, there might be people out there who want to prey on your church or who have bad intentions working with finances. We have accountability built into the software that is meant to prevent them from that. It's also meant to prevent the well-intentioned from making mistakes. We all make mistakes all the time. I know earlier this week I was working on a survey and I unintentionally had made all these little mishaps. It happens to us all. But when we're talking about finances, it's especially important that we can track the source of those mistakes, and we can go back and correct that when need be. Okay, next question. How do you do this in a congregation? Hopefully everybody can see this. Again, I know we have one person who's not able to see my screen. If the rest of you could just let me know in the chat if you're able to see my screen or not able to see my screen, that would really help me out a lot. Tommy, I hope we can get this resolved pretty soon or figure out what's going on for the rest of you. So again, when you're working in a church, How do you manage finances? What does that look like? We know you have a lot of different people working at your church, whether that's volunteer ministry treasurers, a paid finance coordinator, either full-time or part-time, elected church treasurer, or elected finance board. We know different churches have different combinations of those people that are working, whether they're paid or volunteer, full-time, part-time. We want to make sure that the software is accessible to any and all of those people. As we were saying before, Church360 Ledger was designed to increase accountability. You'll see once we get in the software, hopefully within the next 5 minutes, I promise, that there's an audit trail, there's an event log, there's different logins and roles so that different people have different access to different things. It's also designed to prevent mistakes. So, for example, when you're creating a transaction, the software will not let you do an unbalanced transaction. It'll make you go back and fix that if you need to. So we did this by focusing on 2 key personas. One was a church treasurer. This is probably a person who's an experienced accountant. They oversee all aspects of the church, and they care a lot about the details and rely on that audit trail, especially if your church is one of those who has an auditor come in every year or every other year. The other kind of person we designed the software for was just that willing volunteer, maybe someone who's used to balancing their checkbook at home, just wants to enter those transactions, cares deeply about the ministry and mission of the church, the sharing of the gospel, and who really doesn't want to make a mistake. So we've built different things into the software that gives accountability for each of these people and also makes it useful for them depending on whatever background they're coming from. I also wanted to thank the few of you who've let me know that my screen's working. I appreciate that. Tommy, if you're still able to hear and see me, I would maybe recommend trying to log out of the webinar and then log back in. Depending on our internet connection and how your internet connection works, it might not be able to sync up directly. So what we're going to do the rest of the day today, again, real life example, all areas of the software. I hope that when you leave, you can answer this question: how can I use Church360 Ledger to support my ministry? And we're just going to kind of walk through today under the general theme as if you were accounting for a fall festival. And the reason we do this is not because I think all of you are going to start a fall festival this fall, but because it's easier to tell a story as we're going through the software. Hopefully it makes it a little less dry. I can't guarantee it will be completely exciting, but as we share this story, we want to share the story of how you would account for an event or a ministry at your church that has multiple income streams, that has multiple expense accounts. So you'll see in a few minutes we have supplies for the fall festival, food, we have decorations. And also we want to show you something that has a specific budget. We know that many church ministries, whether it's for events or for specific areas like children's ministry or youth ministry, have that budget. And we know that different ministry leaders need different amounts of access. So that church ministry treasurer who wants to know everything will have access to everything, but maybe your ministry leader or even an event coordinator might only need to see the budget and won't need to print checks. Hopefully I'll be able to show you that today as well. And we also know that all of these events require reporting, so I'll go through the 4 main reports in Church360 Ledger. With that, hopefully we've gotten through enough that we can get started in the software today. So I'm just going to switch my screen over. If you started a trial with us already, you'll probably recognize this screen. This is our main kind of login screen for Church360 Ledger. If you have a domain already or a subdomain for Ledger, it'll be this little ledger, this little set of letters you type in right here. You'll always log into that to get your site. Again, it's secure sign-on. Our developers have worked very hard for that. Each person in your Ledger account will have their own unique email and password. Again, this is to prevent people from making mistakes. It's to develop that audit trail. So once you sign in, this will be your main screen. I'll just give you a brief overview of this main screen, and then we'll start over in our general settings as if you were just starting from scratch, starting with a new book, a new account in Ledger. So a few things to keep in mind on this main screen. Right at the bottom here, you can see we have this infinite scroll that our developers put in. This is the record of all your transactions throughout time in Ledger. And then we have these 5 graphs up here. We have our running balance graph, which takes into account your assets minus your liabilities. And then each of these 4 represent 4 different areas in the software. All the graphs you're able to drill down into multiple times if you have it set up that way, and see associated transactions with each account. So you can see from that home screen, I drilled into our first checking account that we have set up, and then I drilled into the unrestricted fund. So any funds or transactions that I've set up in Ledger that go to the unrestricted fund can be listed here. And it's really simple to back out. You can either use these little tags right here, or you can click on the little ledger icon up at the top. The other options you have from the home screen, you can close or hide these mini graphs. You can export any screen to Excel. You can also print this view if you'd like to share it maybe at a church council meeting, or maybe if you don't have internet in one of your meeting rooms, you can always do that. And you can also switch between years, between quarters, and you can see the graph switch automatically. My Q3 graph will probably be a little bit better. You can switch through months, or you can put a date range in yourself. So all of these functions are available from the home screen. Next thing we want to do, I'm just going to go quickly through our user settings. So again, these are unique to you. This is where you would enter your email, and then if you would like to switch your password at any time, you can do that in user settings. And then the logout is right here. This is a little Gravatar icon. If you have an icon you'd like to share, you can also upload that using Gravatar. Once you get started, the first thing you'll want to do is click on the settings cog, and then click on the general option. And you see there's a few options in general settings. You probably won't go here very much, but if you're just getting started, you'll definitely want to enter your church name. This is Christ Community Church, our fictional church here. You'll enter your customer number. You can see this is locked. I can't change anything here. That's our internal number here at CPH that we use to identify you when you call in or when you have a billing question. You can select your check style, you can select a top or middle check style, and then you can select whether or not you use 2 signature checks at your church. Again, if you don't check this box, it'll default just to a 1 signature check. That's something we just added actually in this past week. Our developers implemented that. You can have your church address and your church phone number. Anytime you want to change that, you can click Save, and you can see this little green button will pop up at the top of the information, letting you know that the save took place. The next thing you'll want to do when you're just getting started is you want to create a new book. And for those of you who haven't been in finance a long time, a book is a way to organize all of your accounts that are around one ministry purpose, one ministry function. So most churches, I'm guessing, depending on your financial structure, you'll just have one book and that will be your church book. We do have some churches who might have a preschool with them or might have a day school, and that's the only case where you'd want multiple books. If you have multiple ministries, you'd usually do that in your accounts. But if you need to set up a new book, the way you do that again is to click on the settings cog, select books, and then once you're there, you click this add a new one button. And I will just call this our day school book to give an example for today. When you're creating a book, you can select your starting month for your fiscal year. Generally, we have our fiscal years in Ledger set to start in January through December. But if you're on a different fiscal year, I know a church I worked at had a July through June fiscal year. That's perfectly fine. You would just select that start month, and then you'll select finally a starting date, which is the beginning of your book activity. So if you're able to select a start date, maybe you started using Ledger in August, but you wanted to backfill your books from January of this year, you'd select January for that starting date for your book. Once that's all set, you just click this submit button, and you can see again the book notification will let you know the book is created. To switch between books, all you have to do is go up to the top here next to our Ledger icon and select which book you'd like to go to. and Ledger will automatically flip between those. Now these other books I don't have much in, so we'll stick on our church book for today. After you create your book, the next thing you'll want to do is set your chart of accounts. And most of you, whether you're coming from another finance software or if you maybe just have your chart of accounts in an actual ledger book somewhere, you'll have this chart of accounts set already. This is probably the most important thing you want to do when you're in Ledger is get your chart of accounts straight. Without that straight chart of accounts, it could be quite a hard road for you. And our chart of accounts is split into 4 different sections. For those of you who are familiar with finance, you'll be very well aware of these. There's assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. So assets are things like bank accounts that your church owns. You can see we add the option for restricted funds within assets. So if your youth fund or your VBS fund is for restricted spending or restricted donations, you can always add that in here by just clicking on the new restricted fund. And then a category is kind of a larger subset of your asset accounts. So you can see here we have 2 main categories, and those have been aligned all the way on the left, and then you can indent from the right. We have our checking and savings accounts, and then you can add new accounts in there. So depending on how your structure is set up, you can do any and all of those things. To add a new account or category, you just click on this button. You would put in your name, your account number if you'd like it, select whether this is an account you can write checks on, and if you have an initial balance, pick that. Just a little word of warning, if you're setting an initial balance, you can change that up to the point of your first reconciliation. But once you've reconciled, we're assuming that all those transactions have matched up and you're not able to change your initial balance. The other 3 expense and income account categories work just like that. You can expand and collapse these areas depending on what you're working on. So you can see we have all sorts of categories here. Since, as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking, about our fall festival today, we're going to add a few categories for fall festival expenses, just so you can see how categories work. So you see I can scroll down all the way to the bottom of my screen here, and we want to add a new category. We're going to say this is going to be an events category. And I like to think of a category just kind of like a folder within your computer where you would have, it's kind of a collecting place for accounts, but it itself does not really have any account number or account title. Within that events account, I'm going to add another category, which is going to be my fall festival category. And then I want to denote in the structure itself that this is really a subcategory. So you can see I'm going to just do that a couple times. You can move back and forth with these indentations. Oh, didn't take that time. To help you set and organize your chart of accounts. Once you have all your categories ready, you can select your new account. So for this fall festival, let's say we had a budget for food. Oh, and it has no initial balance. And again, we'll just have to indent that from within the fall festival category. And then you would probably have a budget maybe for games or entertainment at your fall festival. Enter the initial balance. And then we'll add one for decorations. Indent it. And then we'll add a final one for advertising. Promotion. I know a lot of churches maybe have been using Facebook or kind of other online methods to do advertising for events like this. So you can definitely add that in there. Once your category, your chart of accounts is all saved, and you can see here I had a lot of previous ones. So we have an education category, special projects, ministry groups. The most important thing you want to do is save your changes. And then this confirmation box will pop up saying which categories you've created, which accounts you've created. If you had deleted any, it would let you know that. If you realize that these things are not right, you can always click discard changes and it'll reset you back to your point of your last save. But since we know this is what we want to use today, you can just click the confirm button. And now your chart of accounts will be set. And again, that confirmation page comes up at the top. One more thing before I get into setting budgets, just want to make you aware of, hopefully you guys have been able to see this little information button at the lower right hand corner of your screen. That's in all pages of the software. Our developers put that in, and it's a page sensitive help system. So if you're working in the software just trying out and you forget something we talked about today, you can always click on that help system. You can see this particular help system article is about adding new accounts and new categories and even restricted funds. If we're on a different page, it'll change these. So once we go to the budgets page, it'll have questions about a budget. Once you click on that, there's an inline help message you can click through. You can also see the original article in our article repository, and you can go back here and actually see all of our articles. So that's a nice feature. If you've looked through all the articles and you still can't find anything, let us know. You can click the send a message button. You can just type in your information there and it'll send to our support team, and they'll get back to you in just about a day. I can see we had another person who's slowed up on their internet connection now that Tommy's back. Laura, I would suggest the same thing I suggested to Tommy. It just might be a slow internet connection. I'm really sorry about that today. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to our budgets here. And we know that all ministry areas have different budgets. And to do that, you'll just click on your settings cog and select budgets. Once you're in the budget screen, again, you can pick which budget year you're in. You can see I had different settings for my fiscal years. So in my settings, this fiscal year was set to end in September, so it gives me two options. And if we scroll all the way down here to our fall festival, you can see that those categories and accounts have already been added to your budget settings. To update your budget for any of these categories or accounts, again, a category cannot be edited directly because it's really the sum of all the accounts before it. So if we wanted to have, say, $1,000 for our food budget for a total, you can see I enter 1,000 here, and the totals will automatically split between the next 12 months. Now, if you don't want it to split automatically, that's just fine. If you know, for example, that you're going to spend only that $1,000 for your fall festival in September, you can just go to that month, enter $1,000. You can put it in as many or as few months as you'd like. For games or entertainment, we'll do the same thing. But maybe our decorations budget, we're sharing decorations that we use for VBS. We want to split that expense out throughout the year. You can see that Ledger automatically does the math for you and updates that. If I did have a previous year budget or actual for the fall festival, I would see these numbers below in the teal color. That's just meant to help you plan for the next year based on your previous year's budget versus actual spending. As with all of these things, you can save your changes, and there'll be a message letting you know that your budgets were updated indeed. One more feature with budgets I want to show you, and this is something we just added in the last couple of months. We know that sometimes people might prefer to do their math in Excel and then paste it back into Ledger. That's okay. Our developers have added a function for that. So if you'd like to export your budget to Excel, you can do that. Just click on this Export to Excel button, and you'll see that I got a notification up here that my budgets were not working, or were exported, excuse me. It'll export into this nice formatted report like this. I'll just expand this column a little, and it'll have all the totals from your previous budget in there from Ledger. Now, if you want to go and change anything in Ledger, you can do that. So say I wanted to change my fall festival budget and I wanted it to be $3,000. I wanted to zero these out and say I just wanted $1,000 for everything. I can do that. Oh, I can't exactly type very well though. Sorry about that, guys. Once you've made all the changes, the thing you can do is you can select as much or as little of this in Excel as you would like. Just do Control-C or right-click and click Copy. When you go back into Ledger, just select the cell you want to copy into, click Control V, and you can see that your total is updated. And now this didn't work exactly how we wanted. But you can cut and copy from any position you like. You can start in this top left-hand corner, whatever you need. So if you're a person who likes to work in Excel and split back and forth between Excel and Ledger, you can do that, just so you're aware. Let me make sure I copied everything for budgets here. Once you're done again, just click to Save Changes. I'm going to reset my changes. That's okay. The next thing we want to start doing is setting up some transactions in Ledger. Now, if you've noticed on these few screens I've been through, there's a few things that are constant no matter what view you're in, and that's going to be this search bar up here and this darker green bar at the top. This is your menu bar right at the top, and that'll be visible no matter what screen, what site you're on. You can always get to the home page. You can always be able to print your checks and see your reports and your settings. The other thing that's probably more important for those of you working in Ledger day in and day out is going to be this new transaction screen. So you can create a transaction within any view from Ledger, and you can see we have these 5 main transaction types here. We'll go through each of those different transaction types in just a minute. If you did choose to make a recurring transaction, which means a transaction that goes over and over across a certain number of time, you can access those. In here you can see I have a couple recurring transactions already set up, and Ledger will keep track of those for me. So if I made a new recurring payment and I wanted this to be my water bill, I could select a date and then select Make Recurring, occurs every single month on the first day, for example. You could enter your payee in here. I think I have H2O Water Company in there, and you would save it. It says this recurring transaction was created, and you can see right at the bottom here within my recurring transactions screen, it has your recurring transaction listed. Now if I'm in there and I notice, oh, I already had a water bill payment set to remind me, you can just click on this minus sign and click delete, and that recurring transaction will be deleted. Any recurring transactions you have will appear on your pending transactions view at the time the transaction is set to occur. So you can see here I had my internet bill listed as a recurring transaction, and you can see down here it says this happens the 30th of every month. So today on August 30th I got a reminder that my internet bill was due. I can change the memo to August internet bill, and I can change the amount if I need to. Let's say our internet went up. And when I save that, it'll save just for this August transaction. So when the transaction comes back in September, you'll have that same notification message, and you can change any amount you want. Just think of these recurring transactions more like reminders. You can always go back and edit them as much as you would wish. Laura, there is still audio. You might need to dial the number again, just to answer your question. A few other things in settings. We also have an agreement with Paychex, which is the company that does payroll. And if you don't have Paychex, that's fine. You can just enter your Paychex or your normal payroll functions as you wish. But we know that some churches do use Paychex. I believe when we were developing the software, they took a survey. So you can always import your Paychex file if you are one of those Paychex customers. The next thing we want to do before we get into transactions is show you users and roles. Now, users are anybody with a login that uses Church360 Ledger. So we have a couple people who we have logged in here with all their different roles. The roles are listed here in the gray box. To add a user, you can just click on this blue Add a New One button. You would enter their email address, so I'm going to just use a fictional email address here. And then you would enter whatever role you wanted them to have. So let's say that this Kira Belton was your financial secretary. You can just enter that and click Submit. and it says the user was created and has been notified via email. Now, if you wanted to add additional roles, you just have to click on the settings and go down to roles. And then to add a new one, you just scroll to the bottom and click add a new one. And since we're talking about Fall Festival today, you just create the Fall Festival Director role. And then you'll be able to select which books the role applies to. It can apply to one book or many books, depending on what you're doing. So we're going to apply this just to the church books. And then you can select what this person can do. So if you want them to completely manage the chart of accounts, they have access to everything. If you want them just to view certain accounts, you'll click on this Can View button, and then we'll go back and select which accounts they can view. And then with transactions, we realize we might not want everybody creating journal entries or payments or checks. We'll say that this person can create deposits and can print checks. And we'll click Submit. Now, if you notice, if I go back into my users list, and I wanted Kara Belton not to be the financial secretary, but to be the Fall Festival Director, I could add that. You can have one role exactly or more than one role, and then you'll submit, and the user will be updated the next time they log into their Church360 Ledger account. This all relates to a very important feature that we also just implemented this year, and that's your event log. So your event log is that running record of everybody who's made changes to your account. Now you can see here that we only have one user making changes. That's because this is our text account here and I'm the one using it. But if you had multiple users, it would show their login email on this user screen. It would show what they did, the time they did it, what type of action it was. So if it was created, updated, finalized, or destroyed. You can see if it was a transaction, a reconciliation, or a payee. And you can also filter with these. So if you only wanted to see transactions, you could see that here. Maybe only updated transactions. Maybe you remember putting something in one way, but it got changed. So this will be like that. You can always go back to any of these you want. And again, you can change the time frame to whichever time frame you wish. We'll talk a little bit about the event log at the end of the day too, just if you have a question about that. Oh. The next thing we'll want to do is set up our payees. So payees are people or organizations that you have made checks or payments to. So for today's example, we'll set up a payee for Concordia Publishing House. And to do that, you just scroll down to the bottom of the screen. Hopefully everybody saw that. Click on Add a New One. You'll enter their name. Oh, can't type. Their address. St. Louis. You can enter their zip code or their phone. And then if you have any notes about them. So you could write that CPH supplies the activity packets for our fall festival. You can change these at any time. So if I wanted to go in and edit this, if I notice that CPH supplied activity packets for Fall Festival and VBS kits, I could do that. You can always enter their phone number differently. You can update anything you want at any time, basically. And then click Submit, and the alert message at the top will let you know that your payee information had been updated. Once you have all your payees set, we can access transactions. And notice again, you don't have to go back to the home screen to do that. You can just click on this New Transaction button. The first thing I'll show you is a transfer. So transfer is basically transferring money from either an asset account to an asset account, which I'll show you today. So if you wanted to transfer your money from your checkings account to your savings account, you can do that. Sometimes you might want to transfer between other accounts too. You're definitely able to do that. So if we wanted to transfer from checking to savings, we could do that. So you'll just select your checking account and enter the amount of your transaction. and let me see if I have my savings account in here. I do. And then you would transfer to your asset account for savings. You'll see Ledger automatically balance the transaction for you, so your debits equal your credits, and then you can just click Save. Once it saves, it'll take you to whatever previous screen you were on. The other type of transactions we have here are a deposit. And think of your deposit as kind of like the deposit slip you would bring to a bank. So you wouldn't be depositing money into your checkings and savings using one deposit slip. You do one for each. So that's kind of just a rule of thumb. Treat this like you would your regular deposit slip. If you have a memo, so say somebody gave a donation of money for food to your church, you could select a payee if appropriate and say it was going to your first checking account, and then you wanted it to be applied to your fall festival. Let me see where my income account is here. Oh, I didn't put a fall festival income account. Say you want it to be input into your general fund. You can do that and then just click Save. Again, your transaction was created. The next two things, payments and checks, we'll go through each of them, but there's an important distinction to be made. I know different softwares account for payments versus checks differently, but a good rule of thumb in Ledger is that use payments for any kind of electronic payments, wire transfers, and then use checks only for those payments you're actually writing a physical check to. So for payments, say you were online and you bought crafts supplies from Concordia Publishing House. You would select your CPH payee, and you can see I've done this a couple of times, so I have a few CPH payees in there. I'll go clean that out later. And then you took that money from your checking account, let's say it was $100, and then you expensed it to, let me find my, let's say you expensed it to your entertainment section for your fall festival account. You would click Save, and that's how you record your transfer. Now, if you have a check you need to create, say you wrote a check to the grocery store, food for fall festival, you would select your payee. So I'll select our first grocery store payee. You select which account it comes from. Let's say it costs $1,800. And then again, you'd select, we'll scroll all the way down here to our food expenses budget. It'll balance. And the one thing I like here, if you want to enter a check number, you can. And it'll give you a nice preview here of what your checks should look like when it prints. And again, those check settings are really dependent on how you set up your accounts in general settings in Ledger when you get started. You can just save your check. And then you'll get this message that says your check was added to your print queue. From your print queue, you have a couple options. If you do want to physically print that check, you can. So you would just select this and then click Print, and it'll give you a preview. Again, this preview is based on whether you select middle or top check style, and the print button is right here at the top center. Now, say I don't want to print that. I actually just recorded a check I had handwritten and made. That's okay. You would just click this checkbox here and then do Mark as printed, and the check is removed from the print queue. So you never get confused about which checks you've printed or have printed, whether they're printed via your computer or handwritten out when you enter that transaction. Just click Confirm, and then you can see it disappears from the print queue right here. The next thing I want to show you guys is a journal entry. And the journal entry, if you've been doing finances a long time, you're probably very familiar with them. You can balance the debits and credits how you want. A lot of people use journal entries to record interest payments, which might not be a normal source of income. You can do whatever you want from this journal entry screen. And all of those journal entries will appear in your general ledger when you get them set up. Now there's an indirect way to create a journal entry, and this was one of the features that our developers had in mind when they were developing the software. They knew that not everybody would necessarily think about things in terms of journal entries. but they might know that a change needs to be made to a previous transaction. So if I'm in my general ledger and I look back at my CPH payment and I realize, oh my gosh, I entered that wrong. It wasn't supposed to be $100. Oh, I have to go back to my home screen. Sorry about that. You can click on that payment name and you have a few options to amend your transaction. You can void your transaction, so if you had recorded it at the wrong day or time, you can void it. And as soon as you void it, Ledger will create a journal entry for you that nullifies that transaction and then appears as it should in your general ledger. If you just wanted to change the amount, so say you entered $100 and once there was shipping it was $105, you can always do that. And you'll see it says editing payment here, so you're reminded that you're not making a new payment. You can click save, and it says a new transaction was created for this correction. So that new transaction, it'll appear here letting you know the transaction has been edited. You can see when I hover over there. And then if I go into my general ledger, you can see that there was a transaction created called a correction, which accounted for that extra $5. So that's a really nice feature. You don't have to think about, is this a journal entry? Is this, what is this much? Ledger will think of that for you and record that for you. The next thing we want to go through, I'm going to go back to my home screen here, is I want to make sure you guys know how to reconcile transactions. And reconciling is a really important process because it helps clear out those transactions that have already cleared from the bank and separate them from transactions that might not have been cleared already. So to start reconciling, you'll just click on one of your asset accounts. Only asset accounts can be reconciled. And then you click on your checking account. And you'll see once you're down into that really individual account here, this green button for reconcile will pop up. And the screen looks completely different. It's very green, very different from anything else in the rest of our software. And that was just meant to be a reminder of what you're doing is different than anything you usually do. So this reconciling is probably easiest if you have your actual bank statement next to you and then you have Ledger on this screen. So you just select whatever statement date is listed on your bank statement. You enter the starting balance, and hopefully I did my math right. I usually think I do, and then I don't. And then your ending balance. And again, if you had your bank statement here, you would just enter it exactly as it appears on your bank statement. And then it'll tell you the statement difference and the selected difference. Your ultimate goal is for this off by amount to be $0. And the way you get there is you just start clicking on these transactions. So say I saw in my bank statement that all of these transactions had cleared and were actually on my statement. And as I do this, you can see my off by amount decreases and increases depending on what I'm doing. And once I get all the way up to the top here, you can see that number is going down eventually, right? And it looks like I was off by $50 on my amount. When it's off by 0, I might need to flip a few things in here. Once it's off by 0, you can hit save, and all those transactions have cleared and reconciled. Then, when you go back to your home screen, you'll see there's this lock button, and the lock button means that the transactions have reconciled. So if we scroll down far enough, you can see that back from July, I had reconciled all of these previous transactions. If I went in here to try and edit it, I would not be able to get to the edit screen because we don't want to be able to edit something that has already cleared at the bank. A few other symbols to be aware of on the home screen. There's the void symbol for any transaction you voided, and you can see if I'm not hovered over it, the void still appears, but if I do hover, it'll tell you what date the transaction was voided on, and then you can see the details of the voided transaction here. Once a transaction's voided, you can't go back in and change anything because it was nullified. A few other things to be aware of on the home screen before we get to our reports. You select your date again by going up here to the date picker. For a type of transaction, you can just click on the transaction name. It'll take you there. You can also access a few other things from the home screen. Say you wanted to see all of the transactions associated with your first grocery store payee. You would just click on that payee name from the home screen, and then it'll take you to the payee screen for first grocery store, and you can see the total amount of debits and credits for any payments made to the grocery store during your time in Ledger. You can also access different accounts. So if you wanted to access your savings account and you didn't want to use the mini graphs, you can do that going to the transaction name link and just clicking on it. You can see with this we have our retirement plan, and this graph is very different because you don't make regular retirement plan payments. Excuse me, the memo is not clickable, and then your running balance will always be over here on the left side. The other thing just to be aware of, the red transactions in the parentheses mean that there's money deducted from there, and then the black that aren't in parentheses mean that it was added, which is a very common notation for those who are working in finance software. The last few things I'd like to do today, I want to just go through a few different types of pending transactions just to give us a little bit of practice. So as I was saying at the beginning of the program, for those of you who might be Church360 members, customers, or thinking about purchasing members, any offerings you give in Church360 members will automatically sync with Ledger. So you can see I have this logo here. That's our Church360 members logo. And whenever the transaction in members took place, it comes over to Ledger, gives you the date. You just click on that pending transaction, and it'll have your deposit ticket started for you. So say this was the offerings from August, what was this weekend's date? Let me just look it up here. August 27th and 28th. And it was going into your checking account. And then you can see all these funds have been matched already with Church360 members. So if you have a general fund in members, you would match it with your general fund in Ledger, and so on and so forth. These colored tags are the fund names in members, and then these income fund names are the fund names you've already created in Ledger. Once you've matched your fund names, they stay matched. You don't have to match them each time you go through. I'm going to just click Save here. It'll see my transaction was created. And then if we go down to the 29th, we'll see our offerings deposit was recorded. Just want to show you, this is a little bit different transaction just because I haven't matched my fall festival yet. So say this was a fall festival donation for food. I must be hungry today. And say it was deposited into your checking account. If I try to save now, you can see I get this message that says a transaction must have at least 2 valid line items. That's reminded me that I didn't have an income account associated with that transaction. So I'll look for my my general fund income account because I forgot to add that fall festival income account. And then these two will be matched forever. Now if I didn't want to create that, I can just click out and save. And if I wanted to be really conscientious, I could go back to my chart of accounts and realize, hey, I need to create a fall festival income account. So I would create this account because I don't want all my fall festival transactions being associated there. I'll save my changes. And you can see the more you get used to this, the more quickly you can move through things. So I'll go back to my pending transactions. Fall festival donation. I'll select my asset account, and then I can actually match with my fall festival income account. So any subsequent donations from members fall festival are going to be matched here. So I'll click save. And then you can see on the 29th, my fall festival donation appears right here. All of these transactions, all of these reports will culminate into these 4 main report categories, and I'll just go through these very quickly. There's your general ledger report, and this shows the history of all your transaction types throughout all time. Now, as it was in the main screen, you can filter by payment type. So if you just wanted to do payments and deposits, you can do that. You can do them all. You can filter by payees or you can group by payees. So when we click the group by payee button, you can see that this will be the payee name. So I have a bunch of transactions with no payee, which makes sense. If you're depositing, you wouldn't necessarily have a payee. But actually filter and group at the same time. If I take all these nulls out, you can see that the formatting will group the payees under this big header, and then any associated transactions will be listed below. If I wanted to restrict the date range, I could, and then it'll update automatically, hopefully. And you can even filter down even more by going down to account, and it's still maintaining that group by. And then just to back out of there, you can undo everything you did, or you can back out and go out again. You can export and print your general ledger as much as you see fit. The next thing you'll want to do is your income and expense report. So this shows just transactions for your income and expense account. And these are a really good way to look at your budget versus your actuals for a given time period. So if you want to look at a 2016 budgets for actuals, it'll let you know how much is remaining, how much you've overspent on. It'll calculate the percent of budget all the way down until you get here your income less expense. So it gives you your large-scale financial picture in the end. Again, if you wanted to manipulate this more finely, then on this page I would just recommend going to Excel, exporting, and then doing your final calculations in there. The next report is your chart of accounts report, and it has your assets, liability, income, and expenses. So you can see every single account in our chart of accounts is listed here. You have your starting balance, ending balance, debits, credits, dollar change, and percent change over time. And we decided on these 4 reports when we were developing software. We talked with our accountant here, we talked with other people on church finance, and they thought that these 4 reports would be the 4 main reports needed both for auditing features and just for your general church knowledge. And then the last thing you have is your balance sheet, which just shows your assets and liabilities. And then your assets less liabilities is listed on this bottom line here, which gives you a picture of your equity, your overall financial picture. So those are our 4 main reports in Ledger. The last thing, just to review again, you have your event log, and you can see even these transactions we did today. It gave the exact time, and you can also access certain transactions from the event log if you want to see exactly what happened. With this, I think this is in fact especially important. That was that CPH payment I adjusted by $5. So it'll give each transaction a transaction number, and then give you numbers for both the transaction that are happening right now. So those are all the features of the software. I am going to go back to my PowerPoint slide right now. And while I'm doing that, I know we had a couple questions. Laura, I'm really sorry your audio didn't work. If anybody else has any questions about the software itself, now would be a great time to put those in there. We have one from Linda, I'm sure. While we're doing that, though, I just encourage you, if you haven't started your trial, you get a free 37-day trial at 360ledger.com. You can use that for your 37 days as much as you want. We know, especially with finance software, you want to be able to try that out before making a purchase. You want to know that the software is going to work for you and your church and your financial structure. So please do go to 360ledger.com. It'll ask just your email and your church name. We don't ask any financial information up front, so please don't feel scared that we're going to ask that for you when you really just want to try something out. The trial for Ledger is 37 days because we know that in order to get that full reconciliation process in, sometimes you have to wait for bank statements and checks. So we built that extra 7 days in there from our normal 30-day trial to give you some, hopefully enough time to get everything entered in at least once. The next few things here are my contact info. If you didn't get that down at the beginning, it's right up there. I'll also be sending out an email after the webinar, and you can reply directly to that email. It'll have a link on it. If you want to talk with our sales team today, their contact info is there. Again, the purpose of this was not to get you to talk to the sales team, just to give you some more information on the software to see if it would be a good fit for you and your church. Just a few other notes, and then I'll get to your questions. If anyone else has questions, again, now is a great time to ask them. We do have a promotion going on right now through tomorrow that if you're almost ready to buy the software, you do get $199 off the startup fee. So if you haven't talked with someone already, I'd encourage you to talk with a salesperson if you're at that point. If you're not at that point, we do have other promotions, so don't feel in a rush. We know that the church buying schedule often takes a lot of time and a lot of approvals. The second thing I wanted to let you know is that starting in September, we're going to have a whole bunch more trainings, and where this training was really a broad scale overview, these trainings are going to be more focused. And to find that list, you can go to concordiatechnology.org/Church360 Ledger training webinars. And I'll hopefully remember to put this in my email at the end of the day today. And you can see that we have these short 30-minute training sessions that really kind of start to get into the weeds about transactions. So I know some of you, from what I can see, have a specific transaction question in there. If you do have that and I can't answer it today, I would encourage you to register for these webinars. I think I'll be hosting some and my colleagues will be hosting some other ones. You can register. These are free as well, and they're just meant to give you a more broad overview of the software. With that in mind, I see that we have a couple questions, and I'll try to answer them now. If it's something about a specific transaction, I might not be able to answer it today, but I will either answer it later in a personal email to you or send it over to our support team. One of our support techs does have a degree in accounting, and I would rely on him much more than I would rely on myself to give you a specific transaction advice. But we'll do what we can today. So the first question I saw is from Linda. Is there some way that budgets will just take what you are actually spending and not divide it out? Yes, Linda, I hope we address that. So if you wanted to just put your actual budget, say your actual budget amount in for January, it's only going to put January's in there as long as you click on the January cell. It always totals these over in the totals column because we always want whatever's on the right to match the total. But again, if you want to parse these cells out at one at a time, it doesn't always divide them. It only divides if you're entering into the total column over here on the left. Okay. Let me just read the second question from Alice here. Alice, since your question is more financial based, I'm going to pass that on to Kendall, who's our support tech. I'm sorry I can't answer it today, but I'll make sure Kendall sees it and is able to answer you. Okay. Bill Birch asks, when you enter an income in account, does it also add it into the asset account for that fund? Or do you have to enter both income and asset accounts? Bill, you do have to enter both income and asset accounts. I think what you're asking, if I go back to my chart of accounts here, to continue with my example, you would have to add like a restricted fund within your checking account and then also add that into your income for Friday. So there's not a one-to-one correlation for that. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, we thought about that, but then some churches didn't have a necessarily one-to-one correlation, so we did split it up. So that's a really good question. You will have to add certain funds to both your assets and income. There's not an automatic link between them. Oh, Alice, thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood what you were asking. Yeah. Okay. Kathy has a question about gifts in kind. Kathy, I'll answer that for you in an email. Gifts in kind is actually something we just added with Church360 members, which is our other software. I know it can be confusing between the three of them. So if you have members, gifts in kind would be a way you record donations of material goods. So if somebody donates a TV or a couch or something like that. We just added a function in Church360 members where you can record that on someone's offering contribution record, but we don't have those gifts in kind contributions come over immediately since they're not actual dollar amounts. They wouldn't be hitting your banking account or anything like that. But Kathy, I will email you later and I'll give you all the directions for that. Great question. Okay. That looks like all our questions today. I'll just hang on for a couple more seconds. I know there's a lot of questions in one day. And I'll put my contact information back up there. You guys have been great today. It's always great when you ask questions. I appreciate them even if I can't answer them. It just helps the webinar to be interactive and helps me to feel less alone over here. So thank you guys for those. I will respond to each of you personally if you did ask a question. And again, probably today, I'm hoping sometime within the next 2 or 3 hours, I'll send you out the recording so that those of you who had audio or visual hiccups during the presentation, you'll be able to get that. Okay, it looks like we're not going to have any more questions today, so I just wanted to say thank you again to you guys. I'll log out of the webinar and it'll automatically log you out. And we thank you again for coming today. We had a great time. Bye.